The first sign that something had gone wrong wasn't the alarm. It was the heater. K-17, K to the one person who still bothered to say anything out loud felt. The habitat's floor plates go lukewarm beneath his boots. A small, petty failure in a place where petty failures became funerals if you ignored them long enough. He crouched beside the intake grate, palm hovering, listening for the comforting whir of circulation fans. Nothing. A thin line of frost crawled along the edge of the vent like a living thing. It shouldn't have been able to form inside. The module was insulated, sealed, and built for this world's spite. "Status," he said. The station's voice answered with its usual flat patience. "Thermal loop pressure has dropped by 8%. Auxiliary heat routing engaged." Auxiliary heat meant the backup coils would kick in. Backup coils meant he'd be out there later, on hands and knees in a wind that tried to sandblast the bones out of your body, replacing a coupler that had gone brittle from the cold. Again. This planet ate metal the way some worlds ate sunlight. K exhaled through his nose. Counted to for the way he'd been taught back, when counting could keep you from making a mistake. That killed a crew. "Mark it for repair," he said. "Add to the list." Added. He stood, rolled his shoulders, and turned toward the galley cupboard out of habit. The cupboard was a wall drawer stocked with ration bricks and vacuum-dried soup packets. That tasted like regret. He reached for the least offensive option, citrus-flavored electrolytes, and the lights flickered. Not a full outage, just a blink, like the station had flinched. K froze. Electrical flickers weren't unheard of, but they usually came with a magnetic score, and the outside monitors would already be screaming warnings in the corner of his display. They were not. Instead, a single new icon pulsed on the wrist unit he wore like a shackle, a motion heat tag from the perimeter ray. He stared at it until the numbers resolved. Heat signature, warm-blooded. Range, 5.8 kilometers. Vector, approaching. Mass, approximate, 55 to 65 kilograms. Core temperature, near 37 C. K's first thought was simple and ridiculous. No. The second thought was worse. If the sensors are right, that's a person. There were no people. There hadn't been any people on this ice rock since his last supply capsule. And before that, the one before that, he'd learned to measure time by cargo drop schedules and by the number of times he'd repaired the same hinge. He tapped the display hard enough to make his knuckles ache. The reading held steady. The dot on the map wobbled, drifted, stopped, then lurched again as if whatever was out there couldn't decide whether to fall or keep going. The station's voice returned without being asked. Bioskin confirmed. Organic life form detected. Classification unavailable. Vital parameters unstable. How long? K's throat felt to dry for speech. Estimated time to hypothermic collapse. 18 minutes. 18 minutes. That was time enough to do a lot of things, like pretend the sensor had glitched, make the heater his entire world, drink something stronger than electrolytes, and let the planet keep its secrets. He had gotten very good at letting the planet keep its secrets. He'd taken the post because he was good at it. Kay stared at the blip until his eyes burned, then swore with quiet precision and crossed the room in 3 fast steps. The cold weather suit hung by the airlock like a flayed animal, patched, scuffed, ugly, and necessary. He stepped into it with practiced efficiency. Seal, breather, heaters, glove checks. He hesitated at the weapons rack, fingers hovering over the grip of a compact pulse carbine. He told himself it was for predators, for malfunctioning drones, for the rare feral things that lived under the ice and hunted by vibration. He didn't tell himself it was for fear. Fear did not deserve that kind of respect. The outer door cycled. The world outside met him like a slap. Sky, an iron lid. Wind, a constant insult. Temperature, so far below unpleasant that it became personal. Kay set a bearing and walked. The terrain was an endless, shivering sheet of tundra, where rock ribs jutted up like the spine of something long dead. Half-buried pylons from an abandoned atmospheric project leaned at broken angles. In the distance, a line of black mountains cut the horizon, their slopes glittering with frozen ash. This planet did not want guests. His boots sank and crunched. The suit's servos hummed. Each breath tasted faintly of recycled plastic. 7 minutes in, the dot on his map shivered, then stopped. 6 minutes to collapse. The station's clock warned in the corner of his visor. Then 5. Kay pushed harder, legs burning, mind counting distances and angles. He crested a low ridge and saw a dark shape half swallowed by snow. At first it looked like debris, a torn tarp, a collapsed rover blanket, something the wind had dragged out of his own refuse pile and decided to mock him with. Then it moved, slowly, painfully, a hand to slender, with fingertips that flashed an unnatural blue scraped against the ice. Kay's suit tagged the figure, heat spiked on his visor overlay in the shape of a person. Almost a person. She lay curled in the drift, arms wrapped tight around herself, as if she could hold her own warmth in by force. Her skin was not skin the way Kay expected it to be. It had a deep, wine-rose cast, and where the snow had melted against her shoulders, he saw the shimmer of fine scales like crushed glass. Black hair had spilled across the ice in a tangled fan, and folded against her back-curved, ribbed, unmistakable were wings. Not decorative, not cloth or tech, living bone in membrane, darkened with frost. Kay stopped 3 meters away and lifted the carbine, not quite aiming it, not quite willing to drop it. His thoughts tried to assemble a sensible explanation and failed repeatedly. No registered settlements, no orbiting craft, no distress calls, no thermal signatures large enough to suggest a habitat, no reason for a winged, scaled stranger to be dying in his snow. She lifted her head. Her eyes were a fierce, impossible blue, like a clear flame, and she spoke through cracked lips in a language he recognized with a jolt. "Please," she whispered. Warm. One word, simple, human enough to punch him right in the ribs. Kay didn't lower the weapon. "What are you?" he demanded, and hated how the question shook. Her gaze flicked toward the carbine, and then back to his face, as if measuring the distance between fear and mercy. "Not threat," she rasped. The wind tried to tear the sentence away. She coughed. Steam ghosted from her mouth, warmer than it should have been. The station's countdown ticked down in Kay's visor. 3 minutes. Ventu. Who sent you? He asked, because questions were safer than decisions. She swallowed. No one. Sent away. Her fingers twitched against her shoulder. He noticed the way her wings trembled, not with cold alone, but with something wrong in the muscles. Her eyelids fluttered. She was fading fast. Kay cursed again, quieter this time, and in that curse he heard a different voice older. Commander Sharp saying, if you hesitate, you choose. He holstered the carbine on his back and stepped forward, kneeling carefully. If you bite me, he said, I'll be deeply offended. A sound escaped her that might have been a laugh if she'd had any spare energy. It ended in a shiver. Kay slid his arms under her, lifting her the way you lift a fragile tool you can't afford to break. She was lighter than she looked, all compact strength and hollow bones, as if flight had shaped her species down to the essentials. Her body stiffened in his grip, but she didn't fight. She couldn't. He turned toward the distant shape of his habitat, the wind snarling at the edges of his suit, and started back at a jog. Don't drop, she murmured against his chest. Not planning to, he said. I hate paperwork. I hate conversations with people who have authority over me even more. He felt her breath hitch, almost amusement, almost disbelief. Then the airlock's outer door swallowed them, and warm air slammed into Kay's suit like a blessing. The stranger made a sound half-sob, half-surrender that made Kay's throat tighten. He carried her into the main compartment, past the mineral assay bench he rarely used, and the console he pretended was communications, even though it mostly listened to empty space. He laid her on the bunk, his bunk, the only soft surface, then stripped off his gloves and grabbed every thermal blanket he owned. The station's medical kit was meant for sprains, cuts, and dehydration. It had no section labeled what to do if you find a winged stranger in the snow. Kay worked anyway. He wrapped her in heat layers, careful around the wings, and activated the bunk's warming mesh. Her shivering became less violent, but it didn't stop. Her feet were a mess, raw, reddened. The scales along her ankles cracked like old varnish. You were minutes, Kay muttered, half to her and half to himself. Her eyes opened. She watched him with a kind of wary focus that didn't match her weakness. Was meant, she said, voice thin. Minutes. You were meant to die. She didn't answer directly. Instead, she said, water. Kay brought her heated water in small sips and crushed a ration brick into edible pieces. She tried to eat and gagged, face tightening. Okay, Kay said. Okay, we'll figure out what you can take. He turned toward the wall console. Run a full bio read. Compare to known catalog. All entries. Scanning. The station replied. A pause. Bioscan complete. No match. Hybrid genetic markers present. Convergent structural traits detected. Kay stared at the console like it had insulted him. Hybrid of what? Unknown. He looked back at her. She watched him in return, heat blankets swallowing most of her body. Her wings lay folded, membrane peeking out like a dark sunset. What do you call yourself? Kay asked. For a moment, he thought she wouldn't answer. Then she said, carefully, as if choosing each word from a limited stock, we are the Oreen. The Oreen, he repeated. She nodded once. We were here before your sky machines. Kay's laugh came out rough. That's a bold claim, truth, she said simply. And the way she said it didn't feel like persuasion. It felt like a statement of physics. Kay sank into the chair opposite the bunk. There's been survey teams, scans, seismic mapping. No one found you. We don't want found, she said. We live below. Warm stone. Light gardens. We learned. Surface brings trouble. Kay's mind raced. He thought of the failed atmospheric rigs. The mysterious biological interference recorded in ancient reports. The way the planet's geothermal readings never behaved like pure geology. You did something to stop the old project, he said slowly. Her eyes lowered. We protected. Your makers tried to change the world. We changed it back. Kay sat very still. Somewhere in him, a bitter humor tried to rise. So the planet wasn't hostile by accident. He leaned forward, elbows on knees. If you have a warm city under my feet, why were you out there dying? The silence stretched long enough to become an answer. Then she said, so softly he barely heard it, banished. Kay watched her hand drift to her abdomen, then pull away as if she'd caught herself revealing something. The motion was small, but it burned itself into his attention. Why? He asked. Her jaw tightened. Doesn't matter now. It matters if I'm sheltering you, Kay said, and surprised himself with the steel in his voice. He hadn't meant to sound like a commander. He hadn't meant to sound like anyone who belonged among people. She met his gaze again, and the blue in her eyes looked less like fire now, and more like sky vast. Aching. My clan chose for me, she said. Council chose for me. Pairing. Ceremony. Duty. Kay's stomach sank as understanding threaded itself together. They wanted children. She gave a single, bitter nod. I did not give. So they said I was curse. Her wings twitched. Pain flashed across her face. They marked me. Marked you how? She swallowed. Flight tendons cut. Not full. Just enough. Kay stood without realizing he'd moved. Anger clean, sharp lit through him in a way he hadn't felt in years. So they crippled you and threw you out. Not killed, she whispered. They wanted hands clean. Kay stared at her, and for a heartbeat, he saw not an alien, but the universal shape of exile. The way a community could decide your life was inconvenient and call it justice. He exhaled hard and forced himself to sit again, because rage wouldn't warm the room. What's your name? He asked instead, making it simple. She hesitated, then said, Sawyer, Sawyer. Kay tasted the sound. I'm K-17. The station logs call me a lot of things. You can call me Kay. Sawyer's eyes narrowed with faint amusement. Kay. Yeah, Kay said. Short. Hard to misspell. Helps when you're yelling at someone. A tiny curve touched her mouth. It wasn't a smile yet, but it wasn't nothing. That night, the wind screamed itself hoarse against the habitat walls. Kay lay on the emergency cot he kept for inspectors who never arrived, listening to the heater fight for its life, and wondered how many secrets could exist beneath a world he thought he understood. Sawyer slept fitfully on his bunk. Near midnight, she made a sound that snapped him awake, a sharp inhale, like someone surfacing from deep water. Kay was on his feet before he thought about it. Old reflexes moving him like a puppet on familiar strings. She was sitting up, blankets sliding, eyes wide and unfocused. Nightmare? He asked. Memory, she said, voice rough. Kay paused, then crossed to the galley and put water on the heating coil. I've got those, he said. Some so vivid I can smell them. Sawyer watched him with cautious curiosity. You were warrior? Once, Kay admitted. He handed her a cup of bitter station tea, the closest thing he had to comfort. I was good at following rules. Then I followed one that shouldn't have been followed. She didn't press. She just waited, a silence that didn't demand but invited. Kay stared at his hands around his own cup. A ship, he said finally, marked civilian, came into a hot zone. We'd been hit by disguised attackers for days. I made a call fast. It was wrong. People died because I was afraid. Sawyer's gaze didn't flinch. You left, she said. Yes, Kay laughed without joy. I asked for the farthest post they could find so I wouldn't have to look at anyone. Who might remind me what I did? Sawyer's fingers tightened around the cup. And then I came, and then you came, Kay echoed. And the absurdity nearly made him laugh for real. A world full of ice and ghosts, and it drops a winged exile on my doorstep like a joke. Sawyer's eyes softened. Not joke, she said. Maybe. Answer. Kay didn't know what to say to that. He didn't know if he believed in answers anymore. Over the next weeks, Sawyer healed slowly, her body adapting to station food with reluctance and then, grudgingly, with hunger. Ration bricks made her sick, but heated grains and rehydrated vegetables sat better. Kay learned to cook in a way that didn't taste like adhesive. Sawyer learned the station's systems with a bright, restless intelligence that had nowhere to go. She liked circuits. She liked mechanisms. She treated his broken heater loop like an insult she could outwit. You build like you expect everything to fail, she observed one day, elbow deep in a panel. I live where everything does, Kay said, handing her a tool. Sawyer clicked her tongue a sound that seemed to carry entire paragraphs of critique, and tightened a coupling. This connection is wrong. Not made for cold. Tell that to the manufacturer. I would, Sawyer said. Deadpan. But I don't know where your makers live, and I suspect they would not enjoy my tone. Kay surprised himself by laughing. The sound scraped out of him like rust being forced off metal. Sawyer looked up, startled, then her expression shifted, and she smiled properly for the first time. Kay felt it like a physical impact. He started avoiding her after that. Not because she'd done anything wrong. Because something in him, some part that had gone quiet for 11 years, was waking up. And waking things were dangerous. Waking things asked for choices. Sawyer noticed, of course. You move like prey, she said one evening, perched on the bunk while Kay pretended to reorganize a storage shelf. That did not need reorganizing. Did I scare you? Kay's hands froze on a crate. You're not contagious, he muttered. Then what? Her voice held no accusation, only blunt curiosity. Kay turned, leaned back against the metal shelf, and let honesty do what it wanted. I'm out of practice, he said. Being near someone, caring, I chose alone because alone was simpler. Sawyer studied him. Do you want me gone? No. The word came too fast. Kay scrubbed a hand over his face. No. I want you here. I'm just adjusting. Sawyer's wings rustled, a soft sound like fabric shifting. Good, she said simply, because I have nowhere else. And your cooking is improving, which makes staying less heroic. Kay snorted. High praise. They found a rhythm after that. Work. Repairs. Quiet talks by the viewport while the planet rolled its auroras across the sky like slow living curtains. Kay told her about crowded cities, about oceans, about the strange comfort of hearing other voices even when you didn't want to answer. Sawyer told him about warm caverns lit with fungi that glowed like stars trapped in soil, about council halls carved from stone, about laws that felt ancient and heavy, somewhere between one heater repair and the next. Kay stopped thinking of her as a problem the station had dropped into his lap. He started thinking of her as here, and then, one morning, Sawyer woke him with a hand on his shoulder and a look on her face that made his stomach drop. Something changes, she said. Kay sat up, heart already hammering. What's wrong? Sawyer's hand went to her abdomen again. This time she didn't pull it away. In my people, she said carefully, there is knowing. When new life begins, we feel it. Kay's brain tried to reject the sentence, tried to find a safer meaning. Sawyer held his gaze, steady and terrified and luminous. I think I carry, she whispered, not council's child, not their duty, ours. For a long moment, Kay couldn't breathe. Then he moved, pulling her into his arms so hard he was afraid he'd hurt her, and whispered against her hair, You're sure? As sure as body can be, she said, voice breaking with something that sounded like relief. Kay's engineer mind tried to take over nutrition, heat settings, medical scans, modifications because thinking in tasks was how he survived shock. But beneath the list was something raw. Joy. He hadn't expected joy to still be available to him. Weeks later, another perimeter ping echoed through the station, this time slower, steadier, deliberate. A figure approached across the ice, wearing thick hides and carrying no weapon. Wings folded tight, scales dulled by age. Sawyer stood at the inner airlock door with one hand on her belly, face pale. My mother, she said quietly. Kay's hand hovered near the carbine out of old habit. He didn't lift it. He looked at Sawyer instead. Your call, he said. Outside. The older Oreen stopped at a respectful distance and called Sawyer by a name Kay hadn't heard. Before a softer version, like a lullaby, Sawyer stepped out into the cold, shoulders squared. I was erased, she said, voice sharp with old pain. The council can erase ink. The older woman replied, not blood. Her eyes flicked once to Sawyer's belly. Something in her face cracked guilt, hunger, hope. I came with truth, she said. The one who blamed you was exposed. Records found. Lies burned. The council fell apart like rotten stone. Sawyer's breath hitched. Vindication flashed across her expression, then grief, anger, and a harder thing, recognition of what it cost. They want me back? Sawyer asked, voice bitter. They want you back, her mother admitted. Because it makes them look clean. And you? Sawyer demanded. Her mother's shoulders sagged. I want my daughter, she said simply. And I want to know the child you carry. I was afraid before. I chose safety over you. I will not do that again. The words hung in the frozen air like a rope someone was offering across a chasm. Sawyer's gaze flicked to Kay. He gave her a small nod, no pushing, no pulling. Only the quiet promise. Whatever you choose, you won't choose alone. Sawyer turned back. You can enter, she said. For one night, we talk. Nothing promised beyond that. Her mother bowed her head, relief trembling through the motion. Inside, the conversations were hard and slow, and full of pauses where pain lived. But between those pauses, something else moved. Stories of Sawyer as a child. Questions about the station. Small, careful attempts to rebuild a bridge that had been smashed. When the older woman left days later, she pressed a carved charm into Sawyer's palm and whispered, Your father fought for you until it killed him. Sawyer cried in silence after the airlock closed, and Kay held her without trying to fix the unfixable. Time passed. The child grew in a way neither of them fully understood, quick and bright, as if cross-world blood had decided to sprint. Kay rewired heaters, reinforced insulation, turned a storage alcove into a nursery that would be warm enough for any physiology he could guess. Sawyer's wings never regained full strength, but she kept stretching them anyway, stubborn as breathing. And then, on a still night when the planet seemed to hold its storm breath, Sawyer gripped Kay's arm and said, through pain and laughter all at once, now, hours later, as dawn smeared pale pink across the horizon, their child arrived small, fierce, eyes like clear flame, skin caught between two worlds, and the beginnings of wings tucked against a tiny spine like a promise. Kay stared down at the impossible life in Sawyer's arms and felt something inside him shift. The weight he'd carried for years didn't vanish. It simply made room. Room for purpose. Room for a future that wasn't only penance. Sawyer whispered a name in her own language, first soft and sacred, then looked at Kay. We choose together, she said. Kay swallowed hard and nodded. Together, he managed. Outside, the sun climbed over the black mountains, and somewhere beneath the ice, an old hidden society began to stir with news that could not be buried. Because bridges had been built, not by politics, not by councils, by two exiles, one broken station, and a child who belonged to more than one world.